It has been a year since the last video on the Commander X16, and boy do I have a lot of news to share with you. I had been saving up a lot of these news items to show at VCF Midwest in Chicago, and that was a couple of weeks ago, so we did the presentation on that. And so now I'm ready to share all these things with you guys. So grab your popcorn and sit back, because this is going to be a long one. I have some footage I've been sitting on for almost a year that I wanted to share with you about the production process. Now, most of you already saw the footage from Suntronic when we had the first 100 boards manufactured, but Kevin was still building the Vera boards by hand for that production run. So when we went back and had 1,000 units made, we had Suntronic also produce the Vera boards. And I wanted to show you how that works, being it's a surface mount product. First off, a shout out to PCB for supporting the Commander X16 project. They've been working with us since the very beginning, and all of the Commander PCBs have been produced by them. So thank you, PCB. We start off with a large panelized board that's actually 10 Vera boards stuck together. The boards are loaded into a magazine, and then they're dispensed like so into the first pick and place machine. Then this machine will go to town, placing all the parts where they need to go. When a reel runs out of parts, a technician will pull it out and replace it. Then the board moves to the second pick and place machine where even more parts are added. And after that's finished, a technician places the board into something resembling a giant pizza oven to melt all of the solder. After emerging from that, it goes into this machine, which is used for quality control, and the technicians actually look at the various solder joints. Now, at first I thought these were just photographs they were looking at, but then I realized these are 3D, almost like looking at a CAT scan or something. Next, the barcodes on the boards are scanned, which is how they keep track of every board being manufactured. Some of the parts are through-hole or simply too large for the pick-and-place machine, like the VGA ports, so these are still installed by hand. And then these are run through the wave solder machine too, but first a technician sprays the bottom of the board with flux. The first one's loaded into the machine, and this first one is used like a test board to some degree. Once it's finished and appears to be done correctly, they can load up the rest of the boards one after another. Next, the boards are placed into a washing machine that will remove all of the flux from the boards. Once that is done, they're inspected again, and they remove this tape that was used to mask off areas that weren't supposed to be soldered yet. Then it's time for the slicer. This basically separates the individual Vera panels. He starts by cutting off the edges. Now keep in mind, this extra material was only there for the manufacturing process to begin with. Unfortunately, one problem we ran into is the VGA connectors overhang a bit and thus protrude over the cutting line. So the technician decides to just break the rest by hand. And keep in mind, the boards are already scored from the factory, so they still tend to break pretty cleanly down a straight line. And that is how 1,000 Vera boards were produced in a matter of hours, which is mind-boggling to me. Contrast that with the production of the main board using through-hole components, which took several weeks. This is one of many reasons why we need to produce a version of the Commander X16 that is all surface mount, because it'll be way faster to produce, way cheaper, and also the parts will be more readily available. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten very far developing that yet because we spent the last year or so working on all these other projects, which I'm about to show you. Okay, so this is the X16 MIDI card. Now, no, it doesn't look a lot like a MIDI card if you look at the connectors on the end, because you're like, well, those don't look like MIDI ports. Well, that's because these larger DIN-style MIDI connectors simply don't fit well in a bracket like that. So that's why we have these two smaller jacks here, and you have to use an adapter cable like so. Then as for that 9-pin port there is a breakout connector like so that you need a 9-pin cable for. But yeah, it breaks out to all of your different MIDI connectors, so you can do that as well. Right, so obviously being able to connect to external devices is pretty cool, but one of the neat things about this is this header here. And this is the same interface used on the old Sound Blaster cards for wavetable add-on cards like this, and we're even offering a little wavetable card called the Little Dreamer, which is based on the SAM2695 chip, and you can just plug it in like so. And because the X16 audio mixer is part of the bus, you can just stick it in your X16 expansion slot like this, and you've immediately upgraded the sound capabilities. So I want to show you this program called Melodious. It's been around for a while, and it will play our proprietary ZSM format for playing music on the Vera or the Yamaha YM2151. But recently it was upgraded to support MIDI playback. Now, due to the likelihood of copyright matches, I'm just going to play several little 5-second clips of some of these songs. Fortunately, it appears I can play this Christmas tune as long as I want without a match, so this will let you hear some of the different orchestra type instruments. So, what else can you do with it? Well, if you plug a keyboard in, Tim Stotterstrom has written a little proof of concept program that allows you to play the Commander like an instrument, using the wavetable card, of course. Here's an instrument called New Age. And now I'll change it to Sawtooth. And you get the idea. But here's yet another thing we can do with the MIDI card. I have created a modified version of Pesky Robots that uses the MIDI card. Now, as you can see on startup, it auto-detects the card, but it asks the user if you want to use external MIDI or the internal wavetable card. I'll pick the internal card. And there we go. So the game still uses the Vera for sound effects, but all the music is done on the MIDI card, and as you can hear, the effects blend perfectly with the music. Each level has its own unique soundtrack, plus the intro theme, so that's like 16 different tunes. I hope to add MIDI support to all 5 of the games that I have written for the X16, but this is the only one I have right now. Next, I want to introduce our serial Wi-Fi card. Now, the way this works is the card has a 16550 serial UART on it, just like you would have found on most serial cards made in the 1990s, or integrated into motherboards of laptops, etc. The version we're using supports 2 serial ports, port A and port B. Port B goes to the 9-pin RS-232 serial port, and this works exactly like you'd expect. Port A is routed over to this ESP32 module, which is running Bo Zimmerman's Xi-Modem software. And this gives us an interface that looks a lot like an old school modem, but rather than dialing phone numbers, we can dial IP addresses. Now, naturally, we need some sort of software to test this out, and so I'm going to show you ROMterm. I started writing ROMterm earlier this year, and it was mostly just like a test program just to see if the hardware worked. I figured somebody else would probably come along and write a more robust terminal program, but that never happened, and I just kept adding more and more features to ROMterm, and next thing you know, ROMterm is a more robust terminal application. So, and the reason it is called ROMterm is because I plan for it to eventually go into ROM. So when you type menu, you get a list of built-in applications, of which right now there are only 4. Eventually, ROMterm will be in this menu as well, but for the moment, it has to be loaded from SD card. Now, when it starts up, you can select your baud rate over here and your port number over here. And you can see it has auto-detected 2 serial ports and highlighted them for you. The 9FC0 is where the Wi-Fi module is, although you can change this location using the dip switches on the board. The back of the board has information about the different settings. So we're greeted by a message from Xi-Modem. This text is actually coming from the ESP module. I'm going to have a look at my phone book, and I have 4 entries stored in there. But for the moment, I want to switch over to 40 columns mode and then switch to CBM graphics mode. And now I'm going to call Zelch, which is a BBS that runs on a real Commodore 128. Now, even though I'm running at a very high baud rate, the text comes through pretty slow because, again, this is from a real Commodore machine. It's actually quite amazing to see how slow these old BBSs were, and I think this one runs at around 2400 baud, and at the time, we were connecting at like 1200 or even 300 baud back in the day. I think sometimes we look at the BBS era with those rose-tinted glasses. I mean, I really want you to see, this is about as good as it gets for a BBS running on a real Commodore system. So one thing I wanted to show you is the art gallery, and I've spent a lot of time in here reminiscing with the old Pesky BBS art, but I want to show you this one specifically. I think I saw this on at least a dozen BBSs of the time when I would go to page the sysop and they were unavailable, and I bet some of you have seen this too. Anyway, let's switch back to 80 columns and ANSI mode, and now I'm going to call a modern BBS, and what I mean by modern is this runs in the cloud. It's not like there's some machine that's sitting in somebody's basement. This BBS can handle many simultaneous users, and as you can see, it is quite fast. Now let's have a look at some of the doors on here. For example, I can get a weather report for my local area. I also want to show you some of these ANSI games, and the reason I'm showing you these is I want you to see how robust the ANSI graphics support is. This took me many months to get working correctly. I was constantly capturing raw data from these BBSs and looking at it in the hex editor and trying to figure out why certain ANSI commands weren't working, and sometimes old ANSI artwork would contain corrupt ANSI commands that would crash the terminal, so I had to make the parser able to handle that sort of thing. This game here is sort of like Lemmings, but it runs in a terminal. Anyway, there are all kinds of things you can do on a BBS like this, including chat rooms or even sending an email. I mean, for example, I'll compose an email to myself. This uses an ANSI-based text editor, which is very nice. It does things like word wrap, and you can even cursor around and edit your text, inserting words, etc. And there we go. I sent it. So we're actually setting up our own Synchronet-based BBS system as well. I'll show you a little preview of it here. There's not a lot there. It's just basically the shell of a BBS. What we're hoping to do is actually modify it a little bit to both the terminal and the BBS to support both mouse control and some graphics. And I think at the speed that we're running, graphics shouldn't be a problem. I mean, if you think about it, you go back to the 90s, people were surfing the internet on like 56K modems, or actually most of the time it was less than that, like 33.6 or something, or even less. And the speeds we have is way faster than that. So I think it should be totally fine to incorporate some like 16 color graphics and stuff like that into the terminal program. That being said, we're actually looking for some help if somebody would like to be a sysop or administrator of the BBS. We're looking for somebody who can help modify it and keep it up and running and maintain it and all that sort of stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, shoot me an email. But more importantly, this card should allow the development of multiplayer games. So imagine, for example, a multiplayer game of Planet X16. So, long term, I think this card will be a bit of a game changer. So I just want to show you some of the previous iterations of this card so I can show you how it evolved into the card that it is today. So the first iteration of the card was actually a combination of serial and MIDI. So it had the serial port here, and then 2 MIDI ports, and then the internal wavetable. And if you wanted to connect to the internet through Wi-Fi, we'd had this little prototype thing here where you could just plug it in to the serial port like so. This was not a very elegant solution for getting on the internet, so we decided to split this off into separate MIDI and network cards. So this is the second iteration of the card, and this was not designed to be sold. This was designed to be experimented with, and that's why it's got this long section here. And we mounted a Wi-Fi unit at the end, and this actually just has an internal antenna here. You can see little squiggly lines here. It doesn't even use an external antenna, but this was very useful for designing the terminal program and troubleshooting and so on and so forth. So this was the third iteration of the card, and this one was more or less intended to be sold. However, Kevin actually got the footprint backwards, so the ESP module had to mount on the back, which wasn't terribly elegant. And then this is the fourth generation of the card, and it actually worked for the most part, and we were briefly selling these, but then a hardware bug was found dealing with the IRQs, so we stopped selling it. And finally, a fifth generation of the card was made, which fixes that bug and should be going on sale again very shortly. And there you have it. I just wanted to give you a better glimpse of how long this product has been in development, as this represents almost 8 months of design and testing. Okay, so the next thing I want to show is this little radio card. This is another one of Kevin's little pet projects, and not even sure if this will be a production card or not, but yeah, the way it works, it's AM/FM shortwave, and it also receives the WWVB, which is like that's what this little antenna here is for. It's that like atomic clock signal that you can read. He said actually that would probably be going away in the next version, because it turns out the little FM chip that we're using can also get the clock signal from an FM station, so it's kind of redundant, so we probably don't even need that. But yeah, anyway, you just have 2 antenna slots, one for your FM and then one for your AM antenna. And this actually communicates with the computer through I2C. And that's what the little jumper here is for. You can pick one of 2 different I2C addresses. Much like the MIDI card, the audio is carried through the bus, so you can just plug it in, and the only thing you need is an antenna. All right, so we got our little antenna hooked up. So now let's run the little example program. So yeah, we got a little boom box. Sorry, it's a little off the edge here because I'm using a CRT. And this is how it would look on a VGA display. And while I'm here, let me show you the different skins that you can select for the radio. I'm going to turn on FM radio. And I'm not going to leave this on anything very long because I'll probably get a copyright match. Let me turn the volume up a bit.
Free, and your free ACL wristbands are coming up in 10 minutes on the new Mix 102.9.
All right, so I'm going to turn over to AM. There'll probably be some talk shows.
288-9227.
There you go. So it turns out I can't really pick up more than one AM station very well at my house, but anyway, there you go. That's the radio card. Okay, so now I want to spend a little time showing you some of the new games and applications that we have for the system. Now, I'm not going to show you all the previous ones we had because the list is quite extensive and it would take quite a while. So I'm just going to be showing you all the new stuff that's appeared over the last 6 to 8 months, things I haven't shown before. I'll start with the file manager. This is another one of those things I'd like to see added to ROM. So it basically works like Norton Commander or Midnight Commander if you're a Unix fan. So for example, if I wanted to change directories over here and then say, copy this file over there, well, it's that easy. And if I decide I don't want that copy there, I can just delete it. Easy peasy. Another neat feature is that you can actually edit text files directly from the file manager by selecting the file and pressing F4 to edit. It will launch the built-in text editor, and when you're done, it will return you back to the file manager.
List games.
I'm just going to run through these in alphabetical order, starting with Asteroids. This is meant to mimic the original vector style game, and it does run in high-res mode, so it looks the part, but it seems significantly harder than the original arcade, though. Next up is Crazy Frog. Now, the game concept here shouldn't be new to anyone. I believe I did show this game once before, but it was not yet complete and didn't even have sound, so here it is in a more finished state. Next up is Karn, which is a scrolling platform game. This is an early proof of concept. It has music, but no sound effects yet. And one thing that makes this particularly interesting is that the platforms have a 3D effect to them. You can see they change perspective when you move. If you need under a tight spot, you can crawl. Anyway, I think you guys are really going to like what's in store for this game as it continues to develop. Next up is KG3D. Now, I've shown this before, but it has also made some significant progress. So, for example, it now has sprites, kind of like this guy here. Also, you may see some screen tearing during movement, and this is not present on the real game. It's a result of the capture process I'm using. I wanted to show you how nicely the light shading effects work, for example, with this torch on the wall. And since it's based on vectors, you can have things like this staircase, which give the illusion of a 3D map, even though it's not really. And this is the outdoor area. You can see more light shading effects here, and the trees are sprites. Anyway, this is going to be a great game for the X16 as well, and a true showcase of what a 6502 can really do. And the next game I want to show you is Manic Miner. This is an almost perfect port of the famous Sinclair Spectrum game. I say almost perfect. It sounds exactly the same, and the tiles are from the original game, but the sprites are the more colorful versions from the Amiga or MS-DOS version. Even though it is available on the C64, I never had this game as a kid, so I only recently started playing this, and let me tell you, this game is hard. It took me like 30-40 minutes to get past the first level. The timing of everything is critical. And next up is another mine-related game. This one is called Mine Rescue. As I start to play here, you may recognize the game concept. It's very heavily based on the game known as Hero. However, that concept has been improved upon with a larger scrolling playfield. And here's the trapped miner. Now I can proceed to the next level. So, that's Mine Rescue. Okay, this is Othello. You can play it with a keyboard, or, as you can see here, you can also use the mouse if you want. Now, I'll tell you now, I'm not any good at this. I have a minimal understanding of the rules of the game, but I think the author here did a great job making this well-polished game, and I think you'll enjoy it. Next up is Pac-Man. This game actually runs in high-res mode, which is rare on the X16 since it poses several challenges, but it looks fantastic. It's not finished yet, and there's not even any sound or music yet, but I think you'll agree the polish on the graphics and animation is amazing. And I think the author is going to reduce the movement some on the pellets, as a number of beta testers complained it was a bit distracting, which I agreed with, but overall I'm really excited to see the finished version of this game. And of course, here's Petsky Robots. I know I showed it earlier in the video. What I didn't tell you is that I completely reworked the graphics engine in the game. For example, let me show you how it looked before. It was still running in character mode before, and it looked like this. And now it runs in bitmap graphics mode, and I've been able to put the Amiga graphics assets in place, as well as a number of other enhancements. For example, a better rendered map, which will show your location, or the robot's location. The next thing isn't one specific game, it's a bunch of them. Osmu was recently ported to the X16, which is a Z-Machine interpreter, which allows you to play all of the old Infocom games, as well as dozens of homebrew text adventures that run on the same engine. I have a sampling of them here, some of the more famous ones. I'll load up Zork, for example. I'll switch it to dark mode, which I prefer. The graphics, of course, run on the most sophisticated rendering engine of all, the Imagination. But seriously, these are fully functional, and it even supports loading and saving of games, as you can see here. Next up is Time Pilot. This is pretty much a perfect port of the original game. I say perfect, the screen has been rearranged so that the original aspect ratio is preserved and the information area has been relocated to the side. But other than that, it's just like the original. Okay, time to show you the game project I've been working on this year. I was inspired to write this after visiting Roswell, New Mexico earlier this year. When you start the game, your boss Glagnar will appear with instructions. And for this first level, he wants you to bring him 10 Earthlings. And so you're the pilot of the flying saucer. And as you can see, it's a parallax scrolling setup. There are some Newtonian physics here for like speeding up and slowing down. You can also move up and down. Anyway, the idea is to abduct people. Now, right now, the people aren't doing much, but eventually they'll be walking around doing their own thing, and eventually running from the UFO when they see it. But anyway, there you go. First abduction complete. And here's a cow. Oh, and you can drop people too. If it isn't too far, they'll survive, but if you lift them too high and drop them, they'll splat. Same thing with the cow, let me show you. I can't wait to get some sound effects in here, but yeah, this is UFO. Next up is Warlock's Dungeon. You'll probably already recognize what game has been cloned here. So I need to pick a player type. I'll go with Ranger this time. So if it weren't obvious, this is a clone of Gauntlet, which, by the way, I'm absolutely no good at playing.
Welcome. Collect keys to open doors.
But I'll play enough just for you to get the idea of things. I'm gonna get the scroll.
Use scrolls to damage all visible enemies.
And here's what happens if I use the scroll.
Collect treasure.
And so I'll move on to the next level. And there you go. That's Warlock's Dungeon. And the last game I'm going to show off is X16 Maze. The graphics aren't going to blow you away. In fact, it actually runs in text mode. However, it's surprisingly addictive. You have to fill in the maze, but you can't actually move freely. So when you select a direction, your circle always moves to the furthest reach of that direction. So it can be a challenge to figure out how to fill it in. So as Steve Jobs would say, we have one more thing that we want to show. We also revealed an amazing demo at VCF. I can't show it here in its entirety because, believe it or not, the music gets a copyright match on YouTube. But what it is a port of Future Crew's second reality demo that came out in 1993. This demo was recreated using the original graphics and data assets. It's almost indistinguishable from the original demo, except for just a few sections. And while we could probably stream this as a movie from the SD card, that's not what's actually happening here. This is a real demo running on the CPU. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to point out that the original demo required a 386 and recommended a 486 CPU for proper performance. If you want to watch the entire demo with music, there's a link down in the description field, or you could just download the X16 emulator and play it in there. And that about wraps it up for all the new things that I wanted to talk about. So let's talk about the past for just a second. We have sold somewhere in the ballpark of 1,100 of these systems already. And it actually would have been a lot more than that, but we sold out earlier this year and we just haven't had any to sell. So we're actually starting another production run now. If you want to get in on that, there is a pre-order available on the TechSelect website. I will put a link down in the description. We're going to hopefully start manufacturing those in the next month or two. And so yeah, what else is going to be coming down the pipeline? Well, I'm hoping we'll turn our attention more to that second gen surface mount product that I've talked about before. Just getting that designed and tested and everything. And so hopefully sometime next year we'll have that available. And of course, also planning to work on the BBS to try to create a little bit more, like a cooler online service for X16 users. Again, still looking for some help on that. But yeah, if there's one thing I can say, it is that the Commander X16 platform has certainly not stagnated. It has been very active. There is a lot of activity on the Discord group for the developers and just the general social media and the website and the forums and all that. Lots of new stuff being developed and yeah, just lots of exciting things coming down the pipeline. So But I guess that's it. As always, thanks for watching.